So, David, looking at the social landscape, how do we find unity in the midst of all this division and contentiousness and strife? What does that look like to find unity in the midst of that?
Yeah, great questions. I think there are probably a lot of layers to that, a lot of perspectives to that. I'll start by saying some of the layers of unity are our common humanity. Human beings, regardless of your viewpoints or your politics, have a lot in common. And the things that we have in common are at the sort of essential existential level. So here's some things I know about human beings. Me, you, and anybody. Human beings long to be loved, and we long to be appreciated, and we have deep desires to be understood. That's true whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, a centrist, hard right, hard left. That's true of human beings. So can we enter this complex, disunified, contentious political landscape with a viewpoint which is, let's say you're talking to somebody and their views are very, very different than yours in the political spectrum. Can you start by saying, you know what, aside from our politics, we're human beings. What we know, whether you actually said this or it's just an assumption, what we know is we both long to be loved, we both long to be appreciated, and we both have a deep desire to be known. If we just start there, then a lot of nice things can grow out of that soil. If we recognize that and we actually try to listen to each other, to try to understand each other, then a lot of good fruit can grow out of that soil. If we just enter this whole thing with our guns loaded and ready to fire because our emotional triggers are ready to be pulled at a second's notice, we're going to have a really hard time making any headway. There are larger societal issues in play right now than just, is my candidate who espouses the position that I want going to win? The social fabric of our country is in a not good place these days. And somehow we're going to need some way that the direction we're headed takes a turn for a course correction. Because if we keep going the direction we're headed and the divisiveness and the inflammation keeps growing, we're going to be in for some tough sledding. Is that a leader who can bring about a change? If we could find that leader or leaders, that'd be terrific. Is that some entity that brings about that change? Some entity, institution within the American cultural fabric? Maybe. I pray a lot, Jake, for God's Spirit to move in our country to bring about revival, repentance, and re-engagement with unity with each other as human beings. So that's part of the way that I see it. I think another piece is we have to back up and get a bigger picture, like we've talked about in earlier conversation, to see what's going on here. So for Christians, we do not live in a theocracy. America is not a theocracy. It's a democracy. So to expect that the whole country should operate on Christian norms and values, I personally think is naive. Now, would you want, if you believe in certain things that come with Christian norms and values, if you believe that those are healthier and they create for human flourishing, would you like to advocate for them or vote for them when it's possible? I think that would make good sense. But some perspective correction can be helpful. We don't live in a theocracy. We live in a secular, pluralistic democracy. Okay, so if we know that's the case, then we have to begin to ask some of the deeper questions. What does it mean to give to Caesar what is Caesar's and to give to God what is God's? What does it mean to recognize that we live in the duality of both of those entities entities being present in the culture. So this would be some of my way of looking at this, and people can agree or disagree. I'm a Christian. My devotion is to God. My understanding of life and my commitments are that God and His Word instruct us toward the ways of human flourishing. And so I take those seriously, and I carry those viewpoints in the larger sphere of life. But I also know that I live in a country that is a secular, pluralistic democracy.
Mm-hmm.
So there are many millions of people who do not share my Christian devotion, many millions of them. If we're going to find any peace, I have to respect that in them, and they have to respect my Christian devotion. If we both respected each other, we have a chance of finding a more peaceful coexistence. And when I use the word respect, I actually mean respect. For instance, let's say there is a person in our culture who deeply holds a sexuality or sexual identity value that is different than the values that I might hold. Okay? How do I look at that person? Well, if I look at them, I think the way God does, with deep love for this person as a human being, with a gospel lens, which is we are all needy people, hungry for love and in need of love and desiring it deeply. I can see some very common things that I have with this person, even though some of my ideas, my convictions about, let's call it a sexual ethic or a sexual identity, may be different. Now, here's where it also gets interesting. I can love that person, really love them. I don't mean just like a platitudinous theological Jesus loves you love.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can really love this person. Even though I would have a real difference of opinion on these issues, I can really care about this person. And I deeply do really care about this person.
Mm-hmm.
And I disagree on the, let's call it the sexual ethic issue. I may disagree with the sexual ethic that the person holds, but I would defend that person's right to their view because we live in a secular democracy, and the only way for us to do it together without ultimately killing each other off is to respect one another's rights under the secular democracy. That's the render unto Caesar what is Caesar's part. So I might say, whether it's said or whether it's unsaid, I care about you very much. I love you as a person. I disagree with your views on this, and I would, under American constitutional law, defend your right to it. Now, if I don't agree with it, and I wanted to vote for representatives in Congress and in the office of the presidency who might represent my view more so, then vote for that if you want to. And that matters to you, so vote for it. But realizing that we live in a secular, pluralistic democracy, and to be a citizen in America and to be able to get along as Americans, I think we have to be thoughtful about how we do that then. So pick your passion, right, left, Christian, atheist, whatever it is. How do I carry my passion, but do it with respect for people who have very differing views, because we live in this secular, pluralistic democracy. And how do I respect that person who has very different views as a human being, made in God's image, loved by God, given the dignity of a human being as only God can give it because he made us all in his image. These are perspectives that I would say my way of seeing this landscape is that these are ways we can pursue peaceful possibilities in the midst of deep differences.
That's good. That's interesting. Okay, a hard question. And how about this? This is the question that comes to mind hearing this. There's so many things there to pick at and talk about. Can you elaborate a little bit more on defending other people's rights, even when we don't think or believe or know that the right to do said thing leads to human flourishing?
Yes. This is like getting to political science, civics, politics, social ethics, etc.
Mm-hmm.
If you live in a nation that's governed by laws, you have to live under those laws. And there are laws in the United States that I disagree with. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're good laws, and I don't think they should be laws. But if we decide that we're going to jettison law and we are simply going to operate on our commitments and our passions, then you've got anarchy. Then you have a culture that is absolutely burning at the seams. And that is worse than a culture of people who coexist with disagreement. So in my opinion, to be an American, we have to be really thoughtful about the fact that we live in a country that is governed by laws, right? And this is old hat for a lot of people. If you don't like the laws, then work to change them and do that in a constructive way. And that's like civics 101 right there.
Mm-hmm.
But if we don't operate according to the law and we decide we're just going to make our own laws, mm-hmm. we are in a very, very, very bad place. That becomes a lawless, Wild West, survival of the fittest, the most powerful taking advantage of the weaker. Mm. And you don't want to go there.
No.
So if we use this example of a person who identifies or holds a sexual ethic that's very different than mine, but American law protects their right to that sexual ethic. Let's say I'm out in public mm-hmm. and I see a person who identifies this way with a sexual ethic that I don't agree with, mm-hmm. and I see some people bullying that person. Would I defend that person? I would certainly try to. Mm-hmm. Because I care about them as a human being. They are a human being.
Yeah.
They're not an object. They're not a political platform. They're not a political position. This person is a human being who's wanting and desiring life just like every other human being, just like you and me. Wherever they are and however life has gotten them to the place they are in, my life maybe has taken a different track and gotten me to a place that I am in. And even though I don't think that the sexual ethic that they identify with is helpful for human flourishing, mm-hmm. if I don't respect the law and care about this person as a human being, mm-hmm. and I choose to say, I'm going to make up my own laws because of what I think is right, and then I'm going to acquire power to see that what I think is right gains the power, and we're not going to operate in a country of laws, then we're in really bad shape. And I do think we're teetering with some of this, right? Laws are being bent, laws are being stretched, laws are being contended, laws are being ignored. And, this is very, very tricky. I mean, one of the biggest questions in American civic and political life while we're talking here in August 2024 is there anyone in America who is not under the law? right? So the Supreme Court recently rendered this immunity judgment toward a president. Is that a good idea or a bad idea? I would say people shouldn't respond to that question unless you have read deeply and widely on the Supreme Court's judgment on that question and understood the implications of it and not responded to it on political emotionalized inflammation. Is that a good idea or not a good idea, right? So we've got this classic polarity today.
Yeah.
It's so easy to see it. Donald Trump, things that he has been accused of doing, is the law going to indict him or not? And to what degree is he under the law or not? Right? These are very tricky social questions. And then you've got Hunter Biden, the son of the current president, and he's being indicted. And is he going to be indicted by the law, under the law, or because he's the son of the president, is he going to be above it or not susceptible to it? Right? So you've got this, like, both parties have a substantial figure who are being indicted and being accused of certain things. So,
And how that stuff is censored or not censored by these giant platforms, these giant media platforms. It gets very interesting looking at that, how even the government influences what can be said and not said.
yes. And how much does the government influence what's being said or not said? And how much are the media platforms and the search engines participating in all of that?
Right.
These are disturbing questions that have people's attention. And I think they're good for us to pay attention to. It's interesting. Earlier, you made a comment about big businesses, big corporate interests that have a financial interest in seeing certain things go certain ways.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to try to listen to people and hear their sense of where culpabilities lie. So this is coming to mind because you just mentioned media outlets. I try to be really charitable. It's hard for me to be charitable to media outlets. I have a lot of frustration and lack of respect for media outlets.
I think you're not alone. I think a lot of people feel that like their trust has been broken with
Right.
so many, and it's not just one.
I have disagreements and frustrations with media outlets across the political spectrum. And some of those media outlets identify left, some of them identify right. That's no secret. But that is relatively modern, Jake. When I was a kid, media was supposed to be completely poker-faced about their partisanship. Like, you were supposed to watch the news and not be able to have any idea whether this media outlet was left, right, Democrat or Republican. But in the last 15 years, that's changed dramatically.
I mean, it sounds like fiction to me, hearing you say that. I'm 29, and so just most of my life, you know, this family is a Fox family. This family is an MSNBC family.
Right. And those media outlets are now unabashedly partisan. Right? There is, I'll say it, there is no doubt that Fox is a strongly Republican, conservative, advocating media outlet.
Yeah.
There is no doubt that MSNBC is a strongly liberal, Democrat identifying media outlet. And if you watch the presidential conventions, the Republican and the Democratic convention, and you flip between those outlets, how they're spinning what you're seeing is just unbelievable. It's just so obvious.
You just have the headlines from the two, what's on their main page, and it's wild.
That's right.
It's like they're watching two different things.
That's right. But I will say where I struggle a bit is I have a hard time being charitable toward the media outlets, and that's my reasons for that, my sense of that. It's got other thoughts. Then a next question that becomes a big, interesting one is, let's just say politicians in general. There are, I struggle with a lot of politicians. That said, there are many great people who serve in politics, local, state, national politics. They're great people. They intend to serve with integrity and character. Now, it's tough when you get into Washington. The political firepower and the anger and the underhandedness, I think, makes it really, really hard for a person to be a person of noble, virtuous character. It's gonna try your capabilities pretty deeply.
Yeah.
But I do believe that there are many people, I'll use a simple phrase, in Washington, who are really good people who mean to do well and serve the country. I also believe that there are a lot of people who are political, self-serving, power grabbers. And
People, grifters, that
sure,
word gets used.
and this is part of the complexity of life. Most of life has the mixture
Yeah.
of light and dark, good and evil. So Washington has a lot of fabulous people and a lot of lousy people.
Right.
And so that's part of what makes it complex.
And people, even the best, air quotes, best person, even their heart is their heart's no different than how I think it's Jeremiah talks about the heart is so deceitful.
Right.
Like, who can even understand it?
We are all very susceptible to these temptations. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
So I can get frustrated with some politicians. But you know the old story, America gets who America wants. I don't know if you've ever sort of heard it that way.
Mm-mm.
But basically, your presidential candidates, that's not an accident. They're the result of many political forces and many partisan efforts. It's not an accident that you get who you get. So you could say we look at the two current presidential candidates and we're concerned about them.
Yeah.
They are a symptom of America.
Interesting.
They are a symptom of the fabric of American cultural life. And yes, they influence it, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Like, does the president create the culture or does the culture create the president? Both of those lines have influence on each other.
It's a little gray there.
Right.
Yeah.
But what gets saddening to me is you could watch either one of these candidates and be disheartened by them, but that disheartening stuff is often a symptom of the larger American population. And that's where it's easy to become disheartened.
Yeah.
Like, really, have all of us as Americans been reduced to this? So an interesting thing happened a little while ago, and I won't go into the details of what it was, but there was an event on the news, and it was a sizable event. So I turned on the news, which I don't usually do. I turned on the news, and I heard the normal newscasters speaking about it, and it was the normal stuff.
Yeah.
Then they had interviews with a number of people who happened to be present at this occasion. And you know what was amazing to me? I was so pleasantly surprised by the citizen man and woman on the street and what they said. They were level-headed, they were insightful, they were articulate. And I wanted to say to the news people, the professionals, these people are way, way better than you guys are. Now, the news professionals have been indoctrinated, right? That barrel is over the falls. The people on the street, I was thinking when they started interviewing these people that this was going to be, oh no, this is going to be terrible. And I listened, and many of them were insightful and articulate and thoughtful and level-headed.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, there's hope. I mean, really, it was kind of a big moment.
That is, yeah. Very interesting. I think people criticize legacy media. They call it, some people even call it that.
Right.
And
Right.
they catch a lot of flack.
Right.
And I mean, it makes sense. Like, we see there's a lot of lies that they've been caught in
Sure.
on both sides.
Sure.
But that is interesting to see the man on the street and be like, well,
The man on the street was much more impressive with how they rendered what happened than the newscasters were.
Yeah.
Right about now, I'm feeling insecure that some people are listening and saying, hey, David Dwight, pastor of a large church, are you aware that the church has problems? Are you aware that there are a lot of pastors who have been creepy and abusive and underhanded? I am. If anyone wants to know, am I aware of that? I am. And it concerns me and it has my attention. Yeah. And let's be prayerful that God will help us stay close to him and honor him with our perspectives and our living in our lives.
That's a question. Maybe we can end on that question.
It's you and I pick up. We'll make it an episode 3 or 4 on the breakdown of trust.